Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, first I want to remind people that these shows are brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation in partnership with the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, the holidays can be really tough for people, can't they, after a loss?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the hardest things about having a loss is that, you've got a holiday and you're used to having that person there and they're all of a sudden not there. So it can be very, very stressful.
It can be, and that's why we wanted to bring a show today with a guest that can help you deal with these holidays, with this, particularly the Easter holiday coming up. Even if you're not Christian and you don't celebrate it in the same way that you might if you were Christian, we hope that you will glean some great information from this show. But we really want to talk about Easter and what it means in the Christian form of Easter, I would say. And we've got a great guest today, don't we?
We do, Mom. And I think you can shed some light on tips and tools and ways that we can get through the holidays and get through this Easter. So would you like me to introduce him?
Absolutely.
Very good. Okay. So our guest today is Bradley Vinson. He is a professional keynote speaker. He is a trainer. He's an award-winning author, a chaplain. He is part of the Men in Grief Compassionate Friends online group, and he's very inspirational. Bradley's inspiration is his 4-year-old granddaughter, Alana, who died in an accident. Welcome to the show, Bradley.
And thank you all for having me. It's great to be here. Great to be here. I'm excited. She was 4 when she passed away.
And I know you said that she died in a car accident at school, right?
Yeah. It was in the school parking lot.
It must be really difficult to bury a grandchild, I would imagine.
Very hard. Through bouts of disbelief, the order of things, the anxiety, the anger, quite frankly, and just not understanding, how something like that can happen as far as just them going ahead of you. It's not, your mind is hard to grasp that.
How long's it been?
It'll be 2 years this May. It was May 11th, 2016 when she passed away.
All right.
What I'm going after with this is that I know we're speaking a lot about Easter, but I know that grief can grab a hold of you any day of the week. Yeah. And Easter is a holiday and we can have, good times and bad times throughout the year. But I want to let people know that grief is like a storm that we're dealing with. And with any storm, you have to seek shelter immediately. You don't kind of wait for the tornado to get 5 feet away. You see it out in the distance and you want to seek shelter immediately. And what I mean by that is, where do you find comfort? Is it in your prayer closet? Is it with friends? Is it with your spouse? Is it alone? And you have to, it's okay to be selfish early on with your grief. And that's what I mean by seek shelter immediately.
So kind of you seek it within yourself.
Yeah, and I immediately kind of went to my kind of prayer closet frame of mind, almost instinctively. I remember the day that Alana died, we had to go out of town to where she was because she lives in a different state. And we rushed there. I don't even remember, honestly, how we got there. It was just a blur. And so we get to the school, and the principal of the school is actually the pastor of the church next door.
Wow. And
he looks at me and he says, Alana's brother does not know what happened to his sister, and I felt it's only right that you tell him.
Wow.
And this is the first time I had met that gentleman, first time I laid eyes on him, and he's telling me I have to tell my grandson that his sister's gone. He was 6 at the time.
Wow.
And so I immediately sought shelter. I prayed in the hallway. I said, God, give me strength. Help me, I'm drowning. And God helped me minister to my grandson. And quite frankly, he ministered back to me. It's amazing, the spirit that he has. I'm telling him about his sister and that, what accidents mean. And there's different types of accidents. Some accidents you have to go to the doctor. Some accidents you have to go see God. And she had the kind of accident that made her have to go see God. And we sat there with each other and we cried. And he said, thank you, Paul, for telling me. And I don't know where that came from. I just prayed before I talked to him. And God gave me those words, and he's been there with me from day one, from moment one, to help me on this journey. But that's what I mean by seek shelter. But while you're in that shelter, I ask people this: what are you carrying?
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to seek shelter. Sometimes you're there alone, and when you're not really alone, God is always there, is what I feel. But you're away from people, and you have that time. What are you carrying? And a lot of people carry guilt, they carry fear, they carry anger, they carry despair. And the thing that I want to tell people is, it's all right to carry that stuff, but at some point you have to cast that off of you. And who are you going to cast that onto? I don't know another human that can bear that burden,
Yeah,
that intense burden. And so you really have to just cast that onto God. But the one thing I want to talk about the most out of this little list I just said is anger.
Mm.
And in Christianity, or people's interpretation of theology, they have this idea that you can't be angry with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them all the time, God can handle it. And who else could you be angry with outside of someone you have a relationship with? Because they know at some point the anger will subside because they love you and they'll deal with that anger. It's hard to be angry with a stranger because you may never meet that person again, and that's a lasting impression. But with a family member or a close friend, and especially with God, you can release that anger because they know your heart. And at
Now,
some point, anger will subside.
one of the problems I've heard with this, Bradley, over the years, and I think we're getting even less religious right now in America. You look at the statistics, or this will be around the world. And one of the things that I've had people say is, I don't have a relationship with God anymore. I didn't, maybe when I was younger, or I never have, or, so I can't, what do I do with that?
Right. Well, and to me, I think it's an understanding of what that relationship was in the beginning. So if you've ever had a relationship, it can be strained, but it's still a relationship. And so what I try to get people to think about, and I have these amazing grandsons. I mean, Alana was in the middle of two boys. The younger grandson was one. No, he had just turned 2 when she died, and her older brother was 6. So they're now 8 and 4. And the 4-year-old, I was taking him to daycare one day, and it was dark and cloudy, kind of like it is now outside. And we get outside, I strap him into his seat, and he says, "Pawpaw, it's sunny." And I say, "No, it's cloudy. It's overcast." "Pawpaw, it's sunny." I say, "No, it's cloudy. It's overcast." He said, "The sun is there." And he points up. I look up, and I don't see the sun. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks. That's kind of like our relationship is with God. Even in the storm, in the clouds, in the darkness, the sun is always there every morning, whether you can see it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like when you have that relationship with God, and the cloud of grief and the darkness of despair and all that stuff can get between you and God and make him hard to see, but the sun is always there.
So I've got a question here that I just got texted into me from someone named Susan, and
Mm-hmm.
she said, I didn't feel any anger when my daughter was killed 3 years ago, but I felt tremendous guilt. And people told me that I should feel angry, but I didn't feel angry. I felt just guilty because moms are supposed to take care of their kids.
I've been there, and that's one of the hardest things to let go of is guilt, because adults are supposed to protect children. Adults are supposed to be able to make decisions for children's welfare, and then things like this happen. I think a lot of guilt, and that kind of goes with my next slide, a lot of guilt comes from loss of control, or the acceptance, or I don't even use the word acceptance, but the realization that you're not in control. So now you have guilt because you felt you could control it. And I tell people all the time, in grief, pain is guaranteed, suffering is optional. And what I mean by that, if you love much, you're going to be in pain, you're going to hurt. Suffering is self-inflicted. And a lot of times the suffering comes from the guilt because we just can't release the idea that we are in control. We are not in control.
Right.
And when control, perceived or otherwise, is lost, you have guilt because you thought there was something you could do for that not to happen. And guilt is one of those things that's hard to shake.
I think for me, part of it was that if I didn't kind of suffer the guilt, then I couldn't protect my other kids. You know what I mean? Like, I want to believe that there's a world we can control.
Right. I was saying the same thing, Mom.
Yeah.
If we knew, and I agree with you, Bradley, we don't have a lot of control. And the fear is if I embrace the fact that we didn't, that somebody else in my family would die.
Right. And I call that catastrophizing, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's like you think every time the other children leave the house or get on their bike or out of your presence, something bad's going to happen to them.
Right.
And I've done that for a while because with me, the hard thing with me, I had to get rid of the cliches in my life, like telling my grandson, I'm not going to let anything happen to you.
Right.
Because truthfully, I'm not in that kind of control. I can do what I can when he's in my presence, but to tell him, I'm never going to let anything happen to you. He already knows better than that at the age of 8 with the death of his sister. And so now I have to temper those kind of things that are cliche-ish that we use all the time that change with grief and change with the truth of, I am not in control. So how freeing is that to realize you're not in control? And so it's that struggle. I'm not in control. That's bad. I'm not in control. Somebody more powerful is. That's good. And it's that dichotomy of that kind of creates the struggle.
Mm-hmm. But Heidi, you found out when you worked with the 9/11 families that you did have to tell the kids that it was going to be all right, that nothing was going to happen to like the mother.
We had to reassure them is that the chances of anybody else dying was very slim and low. But like Bradley said, we couldn't guarantee it, but we had to reassure them that we were going to do everything we could to keep them safe, and so that they wouldn't develop extreme anxiety.
Right.
Because
I completely agree.
Because they had a lot of anxiety about who's next.
Right.
Who's going to die next and who's going to leave me next. Kind of
and my grandson had a little bit of that too. I would drop him off at school and he would tell people that he felt tingly when I left his presence.
Wow.
And I realized that's what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him about it. I said, Papa's going to do the best he can to come home to you every night.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do my best to be here for you and to raise you and to love on you as much as I can. And so, but I just speak differently now. I don't use the cliche things as much as I used to anymore, because I have a pre-Alana life and a post-Alana life, and my post-Alana life has a lot more focus and direction on telling the truth, but telling it in love and as honest as I can, in a way that's going to fulfill and protect.
Right. I like that, Bradley, because, giving age appropriate information and being honest with kids is really important. And I think that adults feel like they're doing them a service if they're hiding things from them. But what happens, as you know, is if you hide the truth from children, they fill in the blanks with the worst case scenarios you can ever imagine. And then they're terrified.
Right.
So I like what I'm hearing. Also, I agree with you with the whole cliches and, things like that aren't helpful. Things like, well, at least it was quick.
Right.
They didn't suffer. At least you have other grandchildren. Those things are not helpful.
Right.
And people mean well, but they're really, really not helpful when we're dealing with loss.
What I kind of figured with that, and this is just in my growth and my family's growth, is that I was that person before Alana died.
Mm-hmm.
I was a person, God needed another flower for his garden and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I had to come to realize those people you pray will never understand your loss, because I don't want another parent to lose a child. So I don't want them to understand. Yeah. So what I have to do at that point is that it's inherent on me to be graceful, because now I know I was them before Alana died. And now that I'm not them, I have to have grace on them for not understanding. But I also have to educate them and let them know, no, God didn't need anybody. God doesn't need anybody. You know, I'd rather have her here. Yes, the truth is she's in a better place, but that doesn't make the loss any less.
Right.
And so I kind of speak against some of those cliches, but I do it in love and I do it with grace because they just don't know. A lot of people in church and other places, I mean, just in the general sense, will say, well, all things do work for the good. You know, something good is going to come out of this.
Right.
And I had to challenge that to define what does good mean. So you have Mothers Against Drunk Driving, you have Compassionate Friends, you have all these other organizations, and those are good things, but that's not biblically what all things work for the good means. It means all things work for the good of those that love God, and that good thing is making you more like Christ. So how do you redeem your pain? How do you redeem your grief? How do you redeem the heartache and the struggle and the loneliness to help you get closer to God?
I kind of,
Because that's the good.
think about it as a diamond being refined.
Yes.
You know, when it comes and it generally has a lot of crud around it and they have to take it all off and
Right.
keep refining it and keep
through the
dealing
pressure
with,
and the heat. Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so most people will think, okay, what is that thing that's good that's going to come out of this? That's not what that means. You know, how do you live with this grief in a redeeming way?
My husband and I were talking the other day, and I said, well, you know, I don't know if anything good came out of Scott dying. I mean, we did Open to Hope, and it's been a great thing for our family, but maybe we would have done other works. You know, it's hard to know, isn't it, Heidi?
Absolutely. Exactly. It's hard to know what our life would have looked like had he lived.
Right. Because I tell people now, you know, I do have a heart for the for the grieving community now, and I want to work with them and, you know, help guide them on this journey and those that are coming behind me, because unfortunately more people are going to get on this journey down the road. But I would have preferred that God not give me the heart to do it this way.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm being obedient and I'm working the ministry and working with people in and out of the church. But I would have preferred that God put this on my heart without having Alana come back to him. One day I was pulling out of my neighborhood and I wasn't paying attention. I was in the fog of whatever was going on. And I pulled out in front of a truck. But just so happens I pulled into the turning lane for my neighborhood and he blew past me within inches. So I'm standing there and I'm shaking. I shook it off. I go run my errands. And on the way back from my errands, I see a car wreck. Now, if I told most people that story, they would say, man, you're blessed. You missed getting into that wreck. So were the people that were in the car wreck not blessed?
Right.
Yeah.
Because something happened to them that they did not desire. I contend that both of us were blessed, the people in the wreck and me for missing the wreck. Because blessing does not mean desired circumstances. You're just blessed. And it's hard to see the blessing in the midst of your grief.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is kind of soul searching and just getting deeper within yourself and having a gratitude jar or having, you know, little, I call them cheesy things, but little cheesy quotes and stuff that you tell yourself and little memes that you put on your Facebook page to bring other people joy. How do I create a meaningful holiday season in spite of deep grief? And it was actually from a friend of mine that's in my grief group. I would like all of us to kind of answer this one, but I would say you have to make new traditions. That's a way to make the holiday meaningful. And Easter and Mother's Day are probably two of the hardest ones for me, because to me, I think those holidays are really, Easter is really for little girls. It's the frilly dresses and the frilly socks and all that kind of stuff. And so it really makes me think about Alana. And then Mother's Day, obviously, because my daughter, her mother, doesn't have this child. My wife doesn't have this granddaughter. And my wife actually mentioned to me that, she was grieving losing the legacy of motherhood. And that's something that a man would never even comprehend, And so how do you make it meaningful? I would say try to make new traditions that honor them. But, I want to be sensitive to this because I tell people your lost loved one is an angel, not a saint. And so that's kind of that. How do you make it meaningful? It's like you honor them, you do things that they would like, but you try to find joy in some kind of way. You can grieve. It's okay to grieve and still try to find joy and happiness. We can't say they're opposite of each other. I can't grieve and show love for my loved one and be happy. You can do both. And there's space for both. And I think that's the main way to have a meaningful holiday season is to do things you think they will like. Try to find joy, but remember them. And if the wave comes, acknowledge the wave, ride the wave, go in your closet and cry through the wave, dry your eyes, and go back and make the turkey for Thanksgiving. Go back outside for the Easter egg hunt. It's okay. You can do both. You can miss them heavily, which I know I will, because I'll see all these little girls with all their frilly stuff on. And I might have to go to the men's room at church for a little while, but that's okay. And I'll come back outside and I'll hear the Easter sermon, and that'll be my day. And I'll go eat with my other kids and my grandkids, and that'll be okay. But you have to be able to do both.
Yeah, I think it helps to ask for help too from friends and family, to help you do some of the tasks that you used to do, or let them invite you over to do something, or, really take care of yourself, particularly in those early years. It's really tough. So you need to love on yourself, as they say.
I like the idea that we can celebrate and be in the holiday and have some joy, and yet also grieve and kind of move back and forth between that. And that is actually called the dual process model. That is actually research-based.
Oh,
so
cool.
I love, as you've seen, Bradley, you're living it. So you've seen that there's something to this.
Yeah. And usually what we have decided to do, we tried to plan something for Alana's first birthday, which was only months after she died. She was born September 1st. And we tried to plan that day. It went okay because we tried to plan a few things. But what we have done that actually helps us is not plan. We take that day off work for sure, and maybe the day before, but we'll let the day happen. So if a friend calls because they remember Solana's birthday, or, hey, how you doing? It's Easter. We know that's kind of a girl-centric holiday. And we'll talk about Alana. We leave space for Alana. We give Alana as much space as she needs that day. Yeah. But if we decide to go out and get a hamburger, we'll just go get a hamburger, And so it's like, we don't try to over-plan it, because now there's more room for disappointment. Because at 3:00, we got to go eat dinner. So now it's 3:40 and we didn't eat dinner. Oh, so we didn't honor Alana because we didn't go eat her favorite dinner at 3:00. So we try to freeform it a little bit.
Talk about freeforming a day when you've got other kids. Talk about the siblings, the little kids.
I think it's stressful for parents, and I'm thinking, Bradley, of your daughter, because sometimes when we have people that die, we would like to kind of put that holiday on hold and maybe doing something totally different. But, she's got her 2 sons that are still little. And so she needs to kind of rise up and put on her game face for the boys. And it can be really, really stressful for parents. And I always say to parents, sometimes you need to just get out of bed and do it. You need to have these holidays, because we need to know as siblings that we're still enough.
Right.
We need to know that we're enough for grandpa, and we're enough for grandma, and we're enough for our parents. Right. That their lives are still going to go on.
Right.
That they're not going to be in a fetal position now and everything has to stop, including our lives.
Right. And one thing I've learned is that with the boys, I have to show myself grieving in front of them.
Yeah.
Because them seeing me grieve and knowing that grandpa is getting better helps them. And sometimes my grandson will just say, are you thinking about Alana? And even if I'm not, I'll say yes.
That's,
Because I know that, okay, he maybe wants to talk about her. He's like, well, I was thinking about her. What are you thinking? And then I actually do start thinking about her. Then I'll say, you know what? Papa's heart is broken. He
yeah.
really misses Alana.
You are
I said,
such
but
a great
grieving better.
role model.
I'm grieving me. I'm not grieving Alana. And I think I had to come to that realization that yes, I would rather have her here.
So you're grieving the life that you had envisioned for yourself, Bradley?
I'm grieving the space in my life that that Alana used to inhibit.
Yeah. Okay.
The physical space. She's
Mhm.
with me now, but I'd rather have her sitting here on my lap.
Right.
I'd rather smell her. I'd
Yeah.
rather play in her hair. I'd rather tickle her.
Mhm.
I'd rather her ask me, do you like pickles? That was her thing. She'd ask people, do you like pickles? And she would ask strangers, do you need a hug? You know, I want to hear that in the physical.
Yeah.
And I can feel it in the spiritual and in my mind and in my memories. I can hear her voice, but I want to hear it in the physical. And that's what I'm grieving. You mentioned the diamond, and the diamond goes through pressure and through the fire and through the crushing to become a diamond. I really feel, and someone else said this, and I picked up on it, those that have questioned their faith are stronger than those that never doubted their faith. And what I mean by that is that once you have struggled with your faith, something has happened to shake your faith and make you doubt your faith, and you've come out of the other side, you're stronger than someone that has never had their faith doubted. Because it's just like lifting weights. I'm stronger from the pressure of weight being on me. I'm not stronger just by sitting at the house watching other guys lift weights.
Mhm.
And
And,
your faith is the same way.
and I can't imagine that almost everyone who's had a loss has got to have doubted. I mean,
And
because
that's
why
very
did it
human and
happen to
very
you?
warranted.
You know,
Right.
why?
Right. I mean, I doubted. I was in seminary when Alana died. Okay. And I struggled at multiple levels. I went through, well, you know what? We're all going to die. So why am I even in school? Because at some point, we're all going to die, you know? And I thought, well, why am I doing this ministry thing? I'm actually giving years of my life to something that may amount to nothing. Alana's not here. And so I started going through all these things. And I doubted what God had me here to do. And then it was, sitting in seminary and saying, Alana never quit on nobody. Alana loved people hard. I mean, she loved people. And how could I not, honor her love by doing something meaningful with my life? And even through the doubt, even through the struggle, even through the non-acceptance of it, I had to keep moving forward. And I know my faith is stronger now. I still have weak moments, but I know my faith is stronger now because of Alana's life and Alana's death. Because I had to be that model, physical model for her when she was here of manhood, of how men should love women by modeling that with her grandma and her mother and her. And now I have to model that in her spirit to keep loving others because she loved people. She was a lover of people.
I
And
love that.
how dare I not honor her by not, doing what I should be doing.
I just love the idea that Bradley's making meaning. And I think it is so important as we heal to make meaning of our loss, because when we do that, we do heal in saying, I have to honor Alana by being a lover of people and doing what I'm doing to, living my best life basically for both of us. I mean, I think it's really powerful when we get to those spaces. And I definitely feel like I need to live my best life for not only myself, but for Scott, because he loved life just as Alana did. And he loved people and he just loved being here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to drop back to something really quickly before we talk about the tomb is empty. And if I'm listening to this and I did not have that kind of a relationship, I had a difficult child. they did maybe overdosed or something that, maybe took their own life or whatever. And I love them. They were fabulous people. And I just don't understand why they would do that. And, all that anger, guilt, kind of thing going on. And I hear you guys talk about, how great they were and how you can honor their life. How do I get to that point?
I think it's you hold on to the things that bring you some form of happiness or joy. No one's life is 100% negative and no one's life is 100% positive. It'd be hard to imagine that. I know it might be 90-10, but there's something there that you can find some happiness in. And it's that idea of, and I say this about grief, and not to sidetrack it, but I tell grievers, you are 100% in control of making people aware of your grief. You are 0% in control of how they respond to your grief. So let's take that with the loved one that was troubled. Okay. You are 100% in control of you. You are in control of how they respond to things that you believe are corrective to their lives. And you have to release yourself of that guilt and despair that's attached to someone else's actions. You can only control what you did. Yeah, maybe you said something one day that wasn't so nice. Yeah, maybe you think you might have broke their heart when you and their other parent got a divorce or whatever that is. But they're still making choices for themselves. And some of those things you have to just release yourself of. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but you have to realize what you can control and what you can't control. And, I mean, a lot of us, well, I'm going to say a lot of us, many people have wayward young people in their lives, sons and daughters and nieces and nephews and cousins or whatever else. And some do come back and some don't come back. But in that, you have to find your foundation of what you're going to stand on. And this is what I believe, regardless of what they do or what they did. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's an easy thing. And there's a process to it. But you can really only control you. And that doesn't mean that you're perfect either. But you can only control you.
That kind of gets us back to Easter and our last slide, yes. Because, the idea of turning things over to Christ.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to end with this one. A really dear friend of mine that also happens to be a counselor lost her daughter many years ago. And I was watching a video about them last night, and her husband told this story about when they left their daughter's bedside. She died in the hospital. They left their daughter's bedside, and his wife turns to him and says, "Tell me what we believe again. Tell me what we believe again." And he said, "The tomb is empty. Christ defeated death. And we can too, by giving our lives to him and believing on him and having hope in him." Now, even if you're not a believer, okay, so what do you find your hope in? If it's not Easter, or it could be a birthday that's a holiday, or Thanksgiving, or whatever day that can bring you down. What do you find your hope in? I tell people, you have to find your foundational truth. What is it that can bring you joy, can bring you happiness, can bring you a solid foundation in your life to be able to keep living life and move forward? Not move on, move forward. Because I don't think we ever move on from our loved ones that are now gone or transitioned, but we can move forward. You start by just breathing. Some of the most natural and automatic things in our lives tend to turn off in grief, and breathing is one of those things. You can sit in your house and you realize, I'm not breathing, and you have to do those automatic things. So today, if all you can do is breathe. And tomorrow, if all you can do is open up the blinds and let some sun come in, breathe and let the sun come in. and you go one step at a time. I do have a website called goodgriefbook.com, and the book is free. It's actually written from one of my research papers I did in seminary. I've turned it into a little ebook. So that book is free. And I have my speaker website that I am wrapping up this week, hopefully. That's at bradleyvinson.com. So they can find me in those multiple places. And yeah, I'd love to have you just commune with you and just spend a little time and bounce some ideas off of each other and let you lean on my hope for a little while, as the doctors say.
I love it. Thank you so much, Bradley. You're such an inspiration to everybody out there.
Thank you all so much. I thank you for this opportunity.
And thanks everybody for watching this webinar today. And we hope you'll visit us at Open to Hope. And we always want to remind you, Heidi and I, that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours, and God bless.